Have you ever noticed how, when someone asks about your childhood, you suddenly freeze? Not because it was terrible, and not because nothing happened, but because somewhere between 7 and 17, it feels like entire chapters went missing. Like you grew up in fast forward and never quite went back to see what was skipped. That quiet gap is what I want to talk about today. Sometimes childhood doesn't end with a dramatic, movie-worthy moment. Sometimes it happens quietly. It can look like cooking dinner for your siblings at 9 while a parent works a double shift, or becoming the mediator during your parents' arguments, or learning to read the emotional atmosphere of a room before you ever learned to read chapter books. And here's what doesn't get said enough. The version of you who had to grow up too fast doesn't disappear. That part still shapes how you make decisions, even now. Picture an 8-year-old who suddenly becomes the most responsible person in the house, not by choice, but by necessity. Something shifts inside. Psychologists call this parentification, which means a child taking on adult roles and responsibilities. But that clinical term doesn't fully capture the weight of being small and holding up something much bigger than you. Dr. Lisa M. Hooper, who has researched this deeply, found that children in these situations often seem unusually mature. But here's the key point. It isn't true maturity. It's adaptation. It's a survival response, the nervous system learning to operate in constant alert mode, as if the crisis is the default setting. What felt normal to you may have actually been someone else's emergency. And many people who grew up this way notice they become very good at certain things, especially reading other people's emotions. You probably remember how you could read your parents' mood the second they walked through the door. Before a single word was spoken, you already knew the tone of the evening. Anticipating other people's needs became automatic. Solving problems wasn't a skill you proudly developed, it was a requirement, because not handling things simply wasn't an option. But here's the part no one warns you about. Those superpowers you built as a child often come with a cost you only notice decades later. What's fascinating is that people who had to grow up too fast usually don't fall apart during major life crises. Big challenges, they can handle those almost effortlessly. It's the small, ordinary things that feel hardest. Asking for help, resting without guilt, being playful, messy, carefree. Those simple experiences can feel strangely unsafe, because early on you absorbed a powerful message. The world doesn't pause for your feelings. Your needs come second. Stability depends on you holding everything together, and that wasn't just a belief, it became your internal operating system. An operating system is basically the set of rules your mind runs on automatically, and if it was built around survival, it keeps running that program long after the danger is gone. In adulthood, this often shows up in predictable ways. You become the reliable one, the calm one in a crisis, the person everyone calls when things fall apart. You're often drawn to people who need help, who need fixing. It might sound like a savior complex, but it's usually simpler than that. Being needed feels like love, because that's the version of love you learned first. Relationships can feel complicated. Real intimacy, the kind where you're emotionally open and vulnerable, can feel exposing. Vulnerability means allowing someone to see your fears and needs. But as a child, that wasn't safe or practical. So even now, even with someone kind and trustworthy, there may be a part of you that refuses to fully relax. You might also notice a pattern of being attracted to emotionally unavailable partners. And before you turn that into self-blame, consider this. What's familiar often feels safe. If love once meant giving endlessly while receiving very little, then inconsistency can feel normal. Predictable, steady affection, on the other hand, might feel uncomfortable, almost suspicious, like you're waiting for something to go wrong. There's also the question of control, and I don't mean being controlling in a toxic, manipulative way, although sometimes it can spill over like that. I'm talking about something deeper, a very primal need to manage every variable in your environment, because at some point, unpredictability meant danger. Chaos wasn't just inconvenient, it felt like everything could fall apart. So you plan, you overthink. You mentally rehearse 15 different outcomes before making even a small decision. From the outside, people might label you as type A, anxious, or a perfectionist, but what they're really seeing is a child who learned that lowering their guard had consequences. Of course you scan for risks. At one time, that vigilance kept things from collapsing. And the exhaustion that comes with this, it's real. That deep bone-level tiredness that sleep doesn't fix, it's not laziness and it's not weakness. It's what happens when a nervous system has been running in overdrive since elementary school. If your body never experienced rest as safe, it never fully learned how to power down. Rest once meant vulnerability, and vulnerability felt risky. There's another layer that can be hard to admit. Many people who grew up too fast have a complicated relationship with success. You achieve things, impressive things, and yet it rarely feels like enough. There's always a quiet pressure pushing you. Do more, be better, move faster, prove it. Because somewhere along the way, your sense of worth became tied to how useful you were. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The world often rewards this pattern. Society tends to celebrate people who are hyper-competent, independent, low-maintenance, endlessly productive. We get things done, we don't ask for much, we handle ourselves. But very few people stop to ask what it cost us to become this way. Over time, you also become fluent in something most people never have to consciously learn: emotional labor. Emotional labor means managing other people's feelings, smoothing tension, anticipating reactions, keeping the atmosphere stable. You can walk into a tense room and sense what's about to erupt, like a conductor guiding an orchestra before the music turns chaotic. You diffuse conflict before it fully forms. You make sure everyone else feels comfortable, even when internally you're barely staying afloat. And maybe the strangest part is this: you might not even notice you're doing it anymore. It's automatic, like breathing, except breathing keeps you alive, and this pattern slowly drains you. You can be surrounded by friends, family, coworkers, and still feel completely alone. Not lonely in the obvious sense, but alone in the feeling that no one truly sees how much effort you're putting into keeping everything steady, keeping everyone okay. And asking someone to recognize that effort can feel almost unbearable, like admitting you failed at the one role you were always supposed to handle perfectly. So, what do you actually do with all of this? How do you heal from something that doesn't even feel like big enough to count as trauma? Because it wasn't one dramatic event, it was 1,000 small moments of being too much and not enough at the same time. The first step is grieving, and I know that word can sound heavy, maybe even dramatic, but you are grieving something real. You're grieving the childhood you didn't get to have, the version of you that could have been messy, needy, irresponsible, and still deeply loved. That child deserved softness. Saying that out loud doesn't make you ungrateful, it makes you honest. The second step, and this one is hard, is learning that being needed is not the same as being valued. Your worth is not measured by how much you produce, how well you solve problems, or how skillfully you manage other people's emotions. You are not a human doing, you are a human being, and being is enough. You're allowed to rest, you're allowed to not have the answers, and you're even allowed to fall apart sometimes and to receive care without earning it first. And maybe most importantly, you're allowed to be a beginner at being taken care of. It doesn't matter if you're 30, 40, or 50, if you never learned how to let someone else carry the weight, of course it feels unfamiliar now. So be patient with yourself. That child who grew up too fast did something extraordinary. They were resourceful, strong, and unbelievably brave. They kept things together when they shouldn't have to, but they don't have to run the show anymore. It's safe to let someone else take a turn. It's safe to soften. It's safe to be a little young at heart, even if you're arriving there later than most. You've been holding everything so tightly for so long. What would it feel like to finally loosen your grip? If any part of this resonated with you, you can let me know in the comments. I read them. And if you want more conversations like this, you're always welcome to subscribe and stay. You don't have to figure this out alone.